The following program is brought to you by the 0DB Movie Podcast Feed. Good evening, 0DB Movie Podcast listeners, and welcome to Episode 8 of After Dark, our After Hours movie review podcast that we do after our little monster goes to sleep. I am your humble host, Gabe Aniel, and tonight with me, as always for this show, is my other half in life and in this After Dark podcast. That is my co-host and lovely wife, Claudia. Good evening.
Good evening.
How are you?
I'm very well, thank you.
Yes. It is Saturday night.
And the mood is right.
Anyway, so today we're discussing 9-time Oscar nominated and 4-time Oscar winner Guillermo del Toro's Shape of Water.
That's right. This year's Best Picture.
Right? Holy crapola. Obviously directed by Guillermo del Toro, screenplay by him also, and Vanessa Taylor, and the story is by him, of course, right?
Yeah.
Claudia.
Yes.
What did you know about this film before we watched it together? Like, what did you expect? I know we both like Pan's Labyrinth a lot,
yes,
and enjoy a lot of Guillermo's work. But, so were you surprised initially when you first saw the trailer, or were you, not surprised that this was a Guillermo del Toro film?
The first time I saw the trailer, I remember thinking, yes, finally his follow-up to Pan's Labyrinth, because he's had many films since, but none of them have reached the caliber, in my opinion, of Pan's Labyrinth and the magical fairy tale quality.
Right.
That film, although that film was more of a horror film, but when I saw the trailer for this movie, I thought he's back, and I knew he was going to get a lot of attention for it. It was a beautiful trailer. Apparently,
this movie, he said, with this Pan's Labyrinth and the other one, the
other one before Pan's Labyrinth, I never even saw it. I don't think.
I'll tell you right now. He did it first. He was the one that he did first. The Devil's Backbone.
That's right. And then Pan's Labyrinth, and then...
Right. So, basically what he said about those three was, he said when this one, he's like, if this would have been a bomb, I would have quit. I would have retired as a director.
Oh, wow.
He was like, that was, it was either all or none.
Right.
Because that's how personal it was to them. I was excited to see this film because of how much I like everything I've seen by Guillermo del Toro. So that's the bias I go in with. I'm like, this is going to be great,
right.
You know? Now, there's stuff I haven't seen of his because it either slipped through the cracks or some of them I didn't even know it was a film of his.
Right.
Like, someone would be talking about a film of his later, and I'm like, holy crap, that was his film?
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
I don't know why. I thought I was a fan, but I guess I'm not a fanboy to know his whole repertoire, you know?
Right.
Yeah, why don't you take me through a little bit or all of what we saw, and, I'll be sure to jump in with my 2 cents periodically, hopefully with a little comic relief, but...
Well,
it is what it is.
Yeah. Before I even start on the movie, I just wanted to say, I remember we got to see him speak in person. We went to, I guess it was Borders.
Yeah, it was a book signing.
Before it closed many years ago. And he was promoting the second book of his vampire trilogy with Chuck Hogan, who had written... a lot of other books, and Thick as Thieves or something was one of the...
And this is The Strain, right?
The Strain. So we went to see him talk about that, and I remember...
Which is a TV series now.
Right, on FX, I think.
I believe
We
so,
haven't.
yeah.
I haven't seen it. I don't know if you've seen it.
I haven't
I
seen it
read
yet.
all 3 books. The first book, The Strain, was interesting. The second and third book were really lame.
I read the first book also, right?
Yeah.
And then I think I tried to read the second book.
I
It was
don't
like
know.
an ebook for me.
I don't know, but it was not very good. I hope the series takes off the momentum of the first book, the installment. But what I remember from hearing him speak was that he, first of all, he just comes across, and even anytime you see him interviewed, he comes across as like very humble. Like he's clearly an artist. He's clearly a creator. He has very defined vision. So he is a master at what he does. But when you see him talk, even either in person or on TV, like he always just comes across as like just a regular guy, which I really appreciate.
Oh, so great.
He's just very humble, direct. You know, he definitely he'll say some blatant stuff, but he never seems out of touch with like where he came from and who he's talking to and like who his stories are for. Like he just seems like a very genuine kind of person, which I really appreciate. I also love that he's, you know, Mexican, he's Latin,
Right.
which I'm like, yay, a Latin, like Latino winning the Oscars is great. But just from hearing him speak at that time, he talked a lot about monsters and how he had a rough childhood. And as a child, he felt like these stories, these fairy tales sort of got him through a lot of pain.
Dark times.
And he at the time, it resonated with me because my main film of reference for him was Pan's Labyrinth, where the heroine is, you know, a young girl. And he was talking about like how important children are. In the book that he'd written, there was also a child, and that resonated with me at the time a lot because he was so forthcoming with his own personal backstory and like how as a child he felt almost saved by these fairy tales. So all of that I'm just mentioning as background to this because I think that still holds
That's a
true
big part.
in The Shape of Water. Like just the his arena is fairy tales. Like I think he's really good at modernizing the fairy tale and like really making a strong emotional connection, dramatic connection
It's
to
like
the idea of
dreaming in detail.
Yeah.
Dreaming in 4K.
He's really good at like sort of just creating another realm
Yeah.
that you recognize.
It's so familiar, but yet not like bizarro almost.
Yeah, but you welcome it and you want to be in that world. And so when we first sat down to watch the movie, we'd wanted to see it in the theater, but we never got a chance. So we only watched it. I'm sure it would have been even more beautiful on the big screen, but we only watched it on TV. And what I was looking forward to the most was sort of just wanting to be in that world that I was so sure he was going to create, and he did. But I'm not hating, but I think for me personally, Pan's Labyrinth put me more in that world than The Shape of Water. The Shape of Water is a beautiful film, deserves the Oscar and any other accolades anybody wants to give it because it really is masterful, but it just lacked like that complete immersion. Like I didn't feel completely in the world the way I thought it was going to. And I don't know if it's because I was sort of going by what he talked about before, and there was like clearly a lack of children in this film. Like there was no like innocent child, you know, like that comes through, which is fine. I mean, you don't have to tell the same story over and over again. But you know,
except for Strickland's 2 kids.
I know. Well, but they weren't like the story, you know.
No.
And also, I think this is it's more of a love story than a horror story.
Right.
You know, and my favorite film of his is a horror story.
Right.
You know, so I think it's just my own preference, but
No, one of my favorite monster movies is Creature from the Black Lagoon.
Yeah. Oh,
And this is a direct homage.
Yeah. Yeah. But I mean, do you agree that it's more of a romance?
Oh, yeah. And it's about love.
Yeah, and family.
Yeah.
So there are a lot of big themes that I picked up, as I was jotting down notes and stuff. And like, first, we find out we're in Maryland. The time is like the 1960s, I think. It was early
63
60s.
or something like that?
Right. But to be honest, like just in the costuming and the decor and the design, I thought it was even before. Like I, for some reason, thought it was like the 40s even. It just felt like, I mean, I'm not like a costume authority at all, but it just felt a little older than 1962. And so when they said it was early 1960s, I was like, oh, okay, we're a little further along than I thought. And then, but the concept of time is really important. It comes up a lot during the movie. The concept of what the future is and what the future holds.
Lots of clocks and watches.
The calendar.
Calendars.
They play pivotal roles in the storytelling, like the plot. Like is like plot points are based off of clocks
even
and
timing.
Calendars and timing, and so that was important. The what the future is brought up so many times. The color green is just everywhere in this movie. Mm-hmm. Like it touches everything, and at one point, a character even says, "Green is the future." So we're
the
like
car salesman.
Yeah, right. So we're like kind of like in this
teal.
Yeah, teal. We're like in this just like moving forward. Like it just feels like the movie. Maybe it was that time in American history where so much was going on. I mean, they touch upon racism too and how ugly that was.
Right, like capitalism was taking the forefront of America, and at the same time, what was happening in the back, in the kitchen, quote unquote, was horrible.
Right. And then, I don't know. And then at the same time, I thought that there was like this idea of storytelling itself and how, like what storytelling means in our lives, like as individuals, because there are several scenes where the characters are watching films, like, and then watching the news on a screen.
Right.
And then like there's that beautiful movie theater that is shown a couple of times. So it just seems like everything is like on the screen, like whatever your dreams are, whatever reality is, whatever it is, just seems to be on the screen. And then how you relate to that, or how the characters relate to that. And then also, we're talking about a sea creature that's being held captive. So there's also like a big play on like
also the fish tank aspect of it, which is like a TV also.
That's what I'm going to say. Like there's so many
glass
scenes,
in between.
That glass in between characters is just prevalent throughout the entire movie. Like,
it's almost like that. Is it real or not? Like TV.
Right. Like it's a huge technique, I guess, or I don't know, lack of a better word, for conveying that feeling of watching something, being watched. What that separation between what you're experiencing and what the other person's experiencing. So I thought that was really interesting. And then, of course, we have the idea of this magical creature, but set in like a scientific place, and so it was sort of rooting this like magical creature to our rules of reality, which is we'll talk about it, I'm sure, more, but like we want to study it, or we want to kill it, or we want to
torture it.
Yeah. So, but it was like within this world of analysis, it's not like some wild unicorn that is beautiful and free and like, it's like
they have like a distant
it.
picture of it in the Amazon.
Yeah. And we've captured it. And what are we going to do with it? What's the future of dreaming, basically? It feels like that's a big part of the story. So just a lot of stuff he jam-packed in there. And then there's several homages. I mean, there's like a beautiful musical number,
Right.
where and then we watched like the extras and we hear him talk about how like he specifically wanted it to look a certain way and worked within like the framework of how
Films he had studied for it.
Exactly. So that was all like obviously
So
really precise and planned out. And I think part of the story is just, this is a modern fairy tale. Where do we get our fairy tales? From the screen, the moving image, the classics that we've watched our whole lives. And like, so that's all part of it too. And then, you have the main character, Eliza, who can't speak, which I thought was genius, right? Like,
right.
And Sally Hawkins is like amazing. She emotes so much without speech, and it was wonderful. I mean, I can get into,
Yeah, and what's beautiful about that, when you brought up before the whole like the early 60s, the racism thing and all that, is what's brilliant also is the story. I guess the story is being told for her by an African American female and a gay male.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
True.
Speaking for her at that time.
Right.
It's just like ironic at those times, like that's her voice.
Right. Yeah, I know that. That's a good point, because one of my notes was, what is Zelda's role here? I couldn't, I know that in watching the extras of the movie, and like they interviewed Guillermo del Toro, and he did say that Zelda and Giles, which are these two characters you just mentioned, are, and Eliza are like the same person.
Right.
He said, that they were supposed to be like different parts of like the same character, which is interesting to think about, but I didn't really see them that way. I thought they were well defined as separately.
Yeah, and I saw them as a team also when it needed to be a team.
Family.
Yeah,
that I did note.
But like when Zelda didn't need to know what was going on,
right?
Zelda didn't know what was going on,
right?
Or Giles too,
right? Right. So, so when the film opens, you have this beautiful, dreamlike fantasy. Like you're in the water and you're like, where are we? And like all of a sudden you think you're in the ocean, and then all of a sudden it's clear that you're in this bedroom or living room
or whatever.
And there are all these like regular life furniture, like lamp, all this stuff starts to sort of appear, and you're like, oh my God, amazing. And then we see Eliza, and she's just like resting on her chaise or whatever that I guess it's her bed, but it's like a little couch, and it's beautiful. And immediately you're like, I'm in a fairy tale. This is like fantastic. I'm going to see something I've never seen before,
right?
And it's lovely. And then you don't know while you're watching the movie, but when we saw the interview with Guillermo del Toro, he did say that he specifically wanted to show that she was otherworldly,
right?
She wasn't of this world.
Right.
I didn't read it that way. I just thought we're in a fantasy and she's in the fantasy, but I didn't think she wasn't from our world. You know what I mean? Like I thought she was in a fantasy or like dreaming of being in a fantasy.
Because there is that voiceover, right? Which is Giles mentioning the story of the princess.
Where he basically sets it up as a fairy tale, and he lets us know there's going to be a monster.
Right.
And who's going to almost ruin everything.
Yeah, story of the princess, the one that she loved, the one she loved, and the monster that threatened to tear them apart.
Right, exactly. So we know it's going to be a love story. We know it's going to be a fairy tale.
Right.
And so it's beautiful. And then and Guillermo del Toro also mentioned that whole sequence was accomplished through puppeteering. So it wasn't CGI.
That was so
great. It was like.
We can do a whole episode on just the effects and the making of alone.
It was beautiful. It was like, so that's another nod to like classic Hollywood.
Practical
effects. Just getting it done without.
Practical and CGI living together.
Right.
And making it work,
Right. So then, of course, you immediately pick up on this greenish hue that's going to be throughout the entire film because everything is the opening sequence is basically just all shades of green.
Right.
Like you're in the
Early
water, you're in the
60s
sea.
sanitarium.
I guess. No, but I mean, like even just that.
Even yeah.
Yeah, the part where you're underwater, it's all green, like it's just green. And then you have the alarm that goes off, which signals the start of Eliza's day. So immediately you're talking about time, right?
Right.
It's time to get up. Like the fairy tale's over. It's time to get up. You have to move on. It's jarring. And then we watch her go through her daily routine where she's like getting ready. She makes an egg, sets a timer, and then takes care of herself in the bath. Interesting.
Yeah. Full on, straight up, boom, naked
Wow.
bath,
Getting
egg
busy.
timer.
And I thought that was so interesting because I don't really think I've seen too many movies where immediately your main character services herself,
Right.
particularly a woman. So that was interesting. And I was like, oh, this isn't going to be like some meek character, you know. This is someone who knows what she needs and what she wants.
Right.
you
This
know,
isn't
so-
like an intro to like a Forrest Gump type character. You're like, oh.
Oh, okay. So there's that, and then just the design of the apartment itself looks like a fishbowl because it has that beautiful
Yeah,
window,
that's funny.
and you're like, she's a fish. Like what? It looks like a fish tank. And then of course it gets mirrored when she goes to Giles's apartment because he's the same. Like
Right.
all these.
It's one big apartment that was cut in two.
Right. That's what he said. I didn't see it that way when I saw the movie the first time, but I did pick up on it later. But I still saw like the repetition of the same kind of window in his apartment, and it still gave me that same fishbowl vibe. And then he did this interesting thing. So he's showing Eliza's day, and then he like pans down and you see like the infrastructure between her apartment and what we then find out is a movie theater. So I thought that was interesting because it like shows all of the inner workings.
Right.
And I remember in film school there was a movie, I think it was a Todd Haynes movie, I don't remember. Or maybe it was Blue Velvet. Was it Blue Velvet? Do you know Blue Velvet, David Lynch?
Yeah.
You know it? Do you know like the opening sequence and then somehow it goes from like a nice normal thing and then it pans down into like the earth and it's like all these creepy crawler like bugs and like whatever. So I remember when we were discussing that movie, like the professor was just like, oh, this is interesting because he goes from, you know, he's juxtaposing like everything that we show and then everything we really are, right? And so I immediately thought of that when he's going from her down to the movie theater and you see like just like this inner working of the building and like the structure of it.
Yeah.
So
That reminded me of like Wes Anderson, like the Steve Zissou.
Oh yeah.
With the submarine, like
Yeah.
you go down, you'd see like all
Yeah.
the inner workings.
Yeah, and it's just kind of like a way of showing that there's more to a story. There's more than meets the eye, right?
Right.
Like so that's just a way to
This whole
signal
movie
that.
is about there's more than meets the eye.
And then you see the movie theater, and it could also be like a foreshadowing for later because there's all of that scene with all of the water. But then you see the movie theater, and it's gorgeous. It's like just this regal, like what you would expect 1945 Hollywood to look like. You know, it's
Right.
like red and red velvet or whatever, and it's just a beautiful, huge screen, but it's empty.
Right. And they said also it's Baltimore, right?
I think, yeah, that was Baltimore. So you have the next thing I noted is just immediately I was like, okay, so we have an egg timer. Then you have a calendar with a daily thought. She likes to look at her calendar, and every day there's like a little something that guides her.
Right. You
I
flip
guess.
it over.
Yeah.
And then you get your daily quote.
Yeah, that like sort of guides her. That's a cute, like kind of quirky character thing. And then you see Eliza, she's like preparing food, and you're like, okay, food is another, which I picked up as I went along. Like food is another big theme in the film. Like Eliza's preparing food in this scene, which you then find out she like goes and gives to Giles, her neighbor. So she's like a very caring, giving person.
Right, taking care of people.
Yeah, and then she'll do the same thing with the sea creature. As part of her courting with him is like bringing him the eggs and all that. And then there's a couple other scenes where there's food involved. Michael, is it Michael Shannon, the bad guy?
Yeah,
Dick
Strickland.
Yeah, he like pops those candies.
Yep.
Like so. It's just interesting, like how food plays a part in everybody's character and like kind of shows what they're about. So for Eliza, she likes to prepare food and share it and nurture that way. And then we meet Giles. He's an artist. He's drawing images of the perfect family, which we later find out is because that's his job, that he's apparently lost.
Right. So he's like an advertising illustrator.
Yeah, it looks like Norman Rockwell type stuff.
Right.
Like he's just, depicting like the perfect wife and husband and whatever. And I don't know if he's drawing that particular thing, but later on we see in this scene, but later on we see that he'd been working on something for Jello.
Right.
But anyway, then they're watching the TV and there's some tap dancing going on, and Giles says, "That's so incredibly hard," and again, it's like kind of like you're watching the relationship between your life and what you're watching and what your assessment is. And like, he obviously he's just like a very, we find out later as well, he's just like kind of lonely and sad and like, just sort of like, where have I come? Like
where has it all gone?
Yeah. He feels like there's a longing in him. And so when he says that about the tap dancing, it just feels like he's acknowledging that life is kind of hard. Like
a little resigned.
Everything's been too hard. And then if you think about, the idea of dancing a lot of times translates to sex. Like whenever you have pop songs and people are talking about how they want to dance so hard, they're really talking about how they want it so hard, right? So every time he talks about the tap dancing too, or like later on, there's another scene where they're watching like a musical with dancing, and I just feel like his response is kind of like the way he feels about his own sex life, which is just like very repressed and like forbidden, really. Like, so when he says, "Oh, that's so hard to do," I feel like he's saying, it's so hard to find a partner or find intimacy, And then I said that the story is a lot about the power of storytelling, of watching stories and what that means for living your life, which is what they were doing there. And then Eliza leaves Giles and she's on her way to work, and the movie theater owner gives her 2 tickets to some like old, like religious kind of movie, I guess. Like it was like one of those Old Testament type movies. And he says, "Nobody's coming to the movies." And I thought that was, interesting too, because here's a movie.
Like the magic is gone.
Yeah, like the magic is gone.
No one believes in the magic of movies anymore.
Exactly. And the movie's about the future and like what the future is, and so then for people to not come to the movies anymore is like indicative that something's missing, So I like that. And so then you see that she works overnight. We meet Zelda, who's always covering for her. And Zelda's just
clocking her in,
and the other people always complaining. And Zelda is just like a very loyal friend, a very talkative friend.
She makes up for all the talking.
Yeah, she makes up for all the talking. And later on, she
makes up for all the non-talking.
Right. She says that she can translate. Like she takes it upon herself to translate everything Eliza says. And then I noted that the scenes within the place that they work, like that lab, or what would you call that?
Yeah, it's like a
It felt like a
facility.
bunker or something, like some sort of scientific military.
OCAM Aerospace Research Center.
Oh, that's what it's called?
Yeah, so it's like a NASA type thing.
Okay. So it just was cavernous and also very green, but like
very institutional.
Yeah, like a muted, like almost like gray green, like ugly.
Right.
I thought I didn't like those scenes. They made me feel like, ugh.
It's like very like underground military almost.
Yeah, like, I don't know. It just seemed very drab and like just not inviting, which it's not. You find out what goes on there. But so that was like the first thing I noticed about where they worked. And immediately they bring in the sea creature.
The asset.
The asset, yeah. And what did you think when you first saw the asset, when the way they brought it in?
That was cool.
It was a little steampunk, right?
Yeah, totally. The tank and stuff. The whole set was
Yeah.
definitely steampunk. That
Yeah.
was very cool. It's coming. I mean, the sea creature wasn't a surprise because you see it in the trailers. But the way they bring it in is very cool. And, at first you're a little like, why are they letting these
The cleaning
cleaners kind of hang out and see this stuff? But then later you realize that's the mentality of these workers where they're just like, well, these people are nobodies. So
It's true.
they don't even realize they're there.
Right,
You
right.
know?
It's true. Because I thought the same thing. I was like, why, if this thing is so valuable, like, why would they just have, like, everybody and anybody just hanging around, you know? But you're right. It was because they're almost, like, not even noticing them.
No, and they feel that they're probably morally correct.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like, yeah, you see this? This is what we're doing. This is the right thing to do.
Right.
This is for our country.
Right.
And it's not, yeah. Anyway.
So Eliza basically is like immediately drawn to like the tank that he's in. And so you feel like there must be some connection, not just curiosity, because she just goes right over to it. And like nobody even says anything.
Right.
And so she puts her hand on, I guess, the glass.
Yeah.
And the sea creature responds immediately. And she like kind of gets like scared and walks away.
And he gets all like
Yeah.
excited or agitated or something. We can't tell yet, but there's movement that
Right.
that attracts all the scientists and guards around.
And we haven't seen him yet. Like
No,
this is all
just the
kind of
hand.
like a Frankenstein.
Just the webbed hand.
Yeah, that's right. And I noted that I thought that this was cool when they first bring in the tank that he's in. The camera, like, is moving with, like, sort of against the thing they're bringing in, and then it pans up and like holds on Strickland.
Yeah.
And so you're like, he's the real monster, like immediately, and his face and like he just has like this just horrible expression all the time. And like, you just know that he's
sour.
Like he's not a good person. And,
No.
and I think that's when you first see him, right? When he follows the tank in and then they hold on him. So you're like, oh, this is the guy. He's the monster. So I thought that was cool. And then we're back to Eliza's home, and she's with Giles, and he's wearing a hairpiece, which is so funny.
So funny.
He has some vanity, and he takes her to a diner for some pie. And here again we have food,
Right.
So now
Richard Jenkins, by the way.
Richard
Giles,
Jenkins, yes, he's very good. We have the idea of food.
Right.
And what is it to this character? And for him, we find out it's like a lifeline to connect with like the object of his desire. So he keeps going back to this diner to buy this green key lime pie.
Right. From the pie guy.
From the pie guy that he likes. And it's and it's disgusting. The pie is horrible. He opens his fridge and he has like a million of them because he just keeps
So
going
great.
back
Yeah.
to try to form a connection with this guy at the diner. And it's interesting, at the diner they talk a little bit about like franchising
Right.
and how it's the wave of the future, you know?
Yeah.
And so that was interesting too, because you're like, oh my God, this is like the birth of commerce that we
Right.
know and
And
take
it's like
for
we
granted
do it the same
now.
everywhere we are.
Yeah.
But it like tastes like crap to them.
I know. So the diner's color scheme is green as well.
Yeah.
You
Key
know,
lime.
the key lime pie, everything about it is just like this green hue. I wrote there was obvious flirting between Giles and the pie guy, but then we later find out that there wasn't. But I think that they were playing with that a little bit. Like, what did you think?
I feel like I mean, Giles was obviously like batting his lashes. Mm-hmm. He was all like, "Oh," you know, and I feel like I don't think the guy was flirting with Giles, but I think he was being like the character. He was being the franchise character that he needed to be. You know what I'm saying?
Right,
Like
he was doing
saying
his job.
Yeah, he's
Right.
saying the right
He was
things.
being pleasant.
Do it the right way.
Right. Okay.
As long as everything is the way it's supposed to be.
Right, exactly. We find out later. So then they're back at Giles' apartment and they're eating the pie and it's awful. And then they are watching the TV and like some report comes on about the civil rights, like I guess staging or
Right.
like what's the word?
Protest.
Protest. Thank you.
March.
Yeah, like a march or whatever. And it's just brutal and horrible. And Giles is like, I can't watch this. I don't want to watch this. So again, we have a character reacting to what's on the screen and expressing their reality through their reaction. So that was interesting. And then he switches, he asks Eliza to change the channel and she settles on like some Snow Bunny,
Right.
like musical thing. And they watch that.
There they are brushing off reality.
Yes, exactly. And I think, is that the moment where they start like sort of tap dancing while sitting down? I think they're kind of following the music on the screen and they're both like tapping their feet and they do like a little jig, like, and start laughing. And then as Eliza goes back to her apartment, I think she's doing a dance in the hall. So again, it's like this idea of like dance equals sex equals intimacy, right? And so like you can tell that she's very curious and she's very like alive in that sense. Like
Right.
I think she wants to indulge in that, you know, like that feeling of being in something intimate.
I think what really helps with all that too is the camera movement. Mm-hmm. I noticed a lot of, I was telling you, with coming in, always moving in, like, or if someone's like walking in, the camera's moving out, or if someone's walking out, the camera's moving in, with the little side to sides too.
It's like always dancing too.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's like making love to everybody.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
I know, it's very, and even the idea of like the hard boiled egg, an egg, is a symbol of fertility, isn't it? Of rebirth, of change. So just the fact that
The egg, but not the hard-boiled egg, right?
Well, I guess the idea of an egg, like I guess a hard boiled egg, I don't know, but it just seems like of all the things she could be cooking,
Right.
she's cooking an egg over and over and over again, right?
Right.
So that's part of it. And then I wrote, why does Zelda talk so much? What is she telling us? Because she really does. She just talks a lot. You know, when they're at work, she's like, ba, 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 ba. She talks about Brewster and like that. And I think maybe part of it is just to set up how, or accentuate how Eliza doesn't talk. And she just listens and she reacts. And maybe that's part of it. But it was a little like annoying.
Right.
And it was like a little.
Well, Zelda's like, if she's not going to talk, I'm just going to let it all out, right?
I guess. And you could, yeah, and you could see how Eliza is a good listener, a good communicator, which are all important because when she meets the sea creature.
Doesn't judge.
Doesn't judge, right. Right. She's very open. So then we have, so Eliza and Zelda are cleaning the bathroom. And Strickland comes in. And he's disgusting.
Right.
First of all, he comes in with the freaking cattle prod and puts it down on the sink. And it's got like blood on it. So you have this just washed, cleaned up sink, white. And all of a sudden you've got like this bright red blood on it. And you're like, oh my God. And at the same time, he's like using the bathroom. And they're like, oh, we'll leave. And he's like, oh no, please stay. And it's like, you're disgusting. Oh. And he gives them like a whole talk and, whatever. And then
Right, a man washes his hand only once, either like before he pees or after.
And he washed his hands before. And so he's leaving with dirty hands because he's disgusting. Ugh, it was just so like, but at the same time, it's wonderful because you want to be skeeved out by him, right? Like you want, he's the villain, so you want to just.
He washes his hand. He uses the urinal.
Yeah.
As he's telling the story with the hand that he was holding his Jimmy Jam.
Yeah.
He takes out the candy.
Ugh.
Out of its wrapper and puts it in his mouth.
The like almost neon green candy. I know. Just disgusting.
Yeah.
So there was that, and you're just thoroughly skeeved out, and you're like, oh my God, these poor women had to witness this disgusting man. And Eliza notices the blood as he's leaving, and obviously he's using this cattle prod on the sea creature because he's there to guard the sea creature. It's only him and the sea creature. Yeah. And then we hear some yelling in the distance. Screaming. And the next sequence is Eliza and Zelda running to where the yelling is. And here comes Strickland with blood all over his shirt. And we find out holding his hand to his chest. And he like faints. And then they go into like where the sea creature is being held. And they're told to clean up. There's like blood everywhere. And as they're cleaning, Eliza finds the 2 fingers and puts them in a brown paper bag. Like it was the only thing she had, her lunch bag. And so then it's like, ew, see? And then it was like pee-pee hand because he didn't wash his hands and he got them bit off. So gross.
Does that mean the sea creature liked that?
No, that's why he spit them out.
That's true. That's true.
So obviously the sea creature is powerful because he can bite off fingers.
Right.
Right. He's something aggro. He's something to be afraid of. And then so Eliza and Zelda are told they have 20 minutes to clean up. And there's like you were saying, like they're second-class citizens because they haven't even had a chance to finish their dinner. And the guy's like, I don't care. You go clean this up, And you're like, geez.
I'm on break.
Right? And then after Eliza finds the finger, she's drawn to the tank and she connects briefly with the sea creature. I think that's the scene where he comes sort of from
face to face,
and like you see his full figure for the first time because
this is the standing tank.
But then they get interrupted and he like goes away. But she gets to see him for the first time, and it's beautiful. And then I don't know why, but then I have Eliza's watching TV and an old musical is on, I guess after her encounter with the sea creature. She must have been at Giles' house because I don't think she has a TV in her own. And then I have Giles' portrait gets rejected because they wanted green Jell-O. And he did red. So they say, no thanks. And then in that scene also you find out that he's had some sort of falling out with his employer. He had, I think, a drinking problem.
Yeah, it's pretty much a drinking problem.
Because they say, are you drinking? And he's like, no, And I wasn't sure, like, was the employer kind of a little gay too?
I think Yeah,
Did they have a
definitely
relationship,
repressed.
do you
Yeah,
think?
I think alcohol was involved, and I think things were said. But other than that, it doesn't matter.
Yeah. They kind of just touch on it. It's
Yeah.
sort of like there,
Right.
like as part of his story. And then I have Eliza returns to the tank, and this is when the courting begins. So she offers, now he's in that pool,
Right.
right? And she offers him the egg. And at first he has like sort of a violent reaction because he doesn't know whether to trust her, but he very quickly sort of realizes she's not going to hurt him. And he takes the egg and
And then we got the montage,
yes.
right? Mm-hmm. Hard-boiled eggs, teaches it sign language,
Yes.
plays music records to listen to.
She teases him a little bit because she'll play the
Teases him,
music
turn
and
it
turn it
off.
off and play it again until he asks for more music.
Right.
And so you can see that they're starting to communicate. But before that, I think Strickland interrogates Eliza and Zelda. And he is sort of asking them like where they're from. And I'm not really sure why he does that actually.
Because of the fingers.
Oh, right. Because he knows that they were the ones that found
Right.
the fingers.
Right. He's like, they don't know if the fingers are going to take because the fingers were in the bag with some cheese.
Right. So but what I noted here is that like this is sort of the part of the film where we get a little bit of background on everybody. Because like Strickland talks a little bit about himself.
Right.
We find out that Eliza was found near the water. She's an orphan, and she was found near the water as a baby. And then we find out that Zelda's middle name is Delilah, which Strickland goes on about Delilah's betrayal and all
Right.
all this stuff. And then he says, Strickland says that they found the sea creature in Brazil and that he was like revered as a god.
Right.
So we even get a little bit of background.
Amazonians.
Yeah. In Brazil, right? The Amazon. Yeah. So we get a little bit of background about the sea creature as well in this exchange. But then he says, well, he can't be a god because God is made in our image, isn't he? He says to Zelda, he's like, God looks like me, a white man. And then he says, or even you, a black woman. And then he says, no, maybe more like me. And I'm like, oh my God, this guy's a dipshit. I hate him so much.
Right.
So that was just like horrible and cutting, but it's so indicative of the world they're living in, where people just say stupid shit like that, you know? So then we have Eliza on the bus, and we have that several times. What do you think that's about? Like, he shows it at least 3 times, her on the bus.
Yeah, it's when she daydreams, she's looking at the drops of water and then combining, doing a dance. And
yeah, but like, do you really need to show it like 3 times in the movie? Unless there's a reason. Like,
right. It seems like that's the time where she thinks about stuff.
Yeah, it does come across as like her, and I guess she's looking out.
Fish tank style too. She's in the fish tank.
But you know what's interesting now that I think about it?
Fish bowl.
She doesn't look out. She looks at the glass every time.
Right. She's looking at the water.
Yeah, on the glass.
On the glass.
Of the bus.
Of the drops
the window.
dancing.
Yeah.
And joining. Well, because now she's
coming alive.
She's getting feelings for
the sea creature.
The sea creature. So
asset.
now everything looks more romantic to her and stuff.
Right.
We start seeing more red.
Right. Well, that's after their night.
Yeah.
Not yet. But now we have Strickland coming home to his family. That's where the kids are.
Kids.
And I did note that the color scheme in that house is different. It's like orange and yellow, not green. And his kids are watching TV, and his son asks about what the future will be like, which I thought was interesting. So we're talking about that as being a big theme. And then there's this horrible sex scene between him and his wife.
It's very sad.
It's like disturbing because I don't know. First of all, it doesn't look enjoyable at all. But
No,
then,
he's like pounding away.
yeah, and then he's like bleeding on her face.
Yeah.
And so she tells him, "You're bleeding," and he's like, "Shh."
Yeah, and he covers her mouth. Don't talk.
And he says, "I want silence." So you get this feeling that he's like just a very dominating person and like just very singularly minded, like singularly minded. Like he's not interested in
No.
cooperation from anybody.
Right.
Like he doesn't care.
No. Very robotic almost.
Yeah, it was like
Soldier-like.
Yeah, it was awful. And then we see Eliza back, and I think this is when the montage starts, where she's back with the sea creature and the eggs and the music, and they're starting to communicate. And it ends with Eliza dancing for the creature.
Right.
She's sort of doing like the musical number steps that she's seen. And Dr. Hofstetler.
Yes, Robert Hofstetler.
Yeah, he witnesses that.
Yes, he kind of catches her with him.
Mm-hmm. And then we promptly find out he's part of like a Russian operation, which is like, whoa.
He's a Soviet spy named Dmitri.
He's a Soviet spy. And I'm like, what is happening here?
Cold
Like,
War, right? It kind of makes sense too.
Yeah, I guess so. But it was just like
But
out of nowhere.
Yeah, out of nowhere. It's like dun, dun, dun.
Right?
Which is cool. It's a cool little
It's like,
twist.
now we have Soviets. Okay. So he's dealing with the Soviet agents, and they have like this whole shtick about the passcodes, which is really funny because they always get it wrong or
Right.
stupid, or it's kind of like, I don't know if it's supposed to be comedic or what, but it's clearly not the most important thing going on.
No.
But they have to do the passcodes. And then they're eating. They're like meeting at the back of a restaurant, like in the kitchen, to talk about this sea creature and their plans, I guess, their operation. And
Right.
And the doctor is saying how like the creature can communicate, and they don't even care.
No.
Like, they don't care at all, and they're just like more excited about the surf and turf that they're eating.
Right. Remember, I'm not saying exact, it's verbatim, but it's not verbatim. But what I'm saying is when he said we can learn, or the things we can learn from this, and he was just like, I don't care. We don't want the Americans to learn.
Right. Yeah.
Doesn't matter what we learn.
More
they
important.
can't learn.
Yeah.
It's more important that they don't learn.
Right.
Which is kind of like, I thought that was a cool thing, like I thought it was very telling.
Yeah. The
whole
end
cut
game.
your nose, despite your face.
Yes. The end game is to just cut off the other person.
Right. And surf and turf, like he doesn't care about eating a sea creature.
Right. Exactly.
That's why he's like, just kill it.
Yeah, exactly. So then they show Eliza and Zelda back at work, and they're like kind of in the garage area, and she realizes from the other workers when they want to go on a smoke break, they just like tilt the camera up.
Right.
So they can't be seen.
A little foreshadowing there.
A little foreshadowing. I think that's when she gets the idea, though, to break out the sea creature, because she sees that can be done, and she starts to formulate a plan.
Right, but because before that, when he sees her, right? Dimitri sees her, but after that, Strickland comes in and starts zapping him again, and she witnesses that.
I think that he does that now. Like she sees
after the smoke break.
I think so, because I wrote down that she gets the idea for breaking him out because of the camera, and then she comes back and sees that she comes to see the sea creature and sees that he's shackled.
Yes.
And suffering. And then as she's there, Strickland returns and is like zapping him and like doing all this stuff, and like it's awful.
It's awful.
And she hides, but she already dropped the egg and he finds it.
Right.
It's the scene is brutal, like just horrible what he's doing to the sea creature. And then he explains that the sea creature was captured because the people of the Amazon weren't allowing the oil drills to come because their god or whatever is in the water. So they basically took them out so that they could drill for oil.
Right.
Great. Which is...
Make sure you chop down the trees while you're there, too.
I know. And so then they consider the creature as the answer to beating the Soviets to the race to outer space. Like, I guess this is when that, like, high-powered general visits or whatever.
Right.
And they're, like, talking about what they're going to do with the creature.
Right.
And then Strickland says he wants to vivisect it because he wants to find out how it works from the inside.
Exactly.
But the doctor is like, no, we can't do that because, he's
got 2 ways of breathing.
2 ways of breathing, and we can learn so much from him to send a man out to outer space and whatever. And the general is like, well, I'll make that decision.
Right. And Strickland's like, what does he say? Mudfish.
Yeah. He's
have
like,
2 sets of lungs, too.
Right. Like, he's
not giving it any credit.
He just wants to kill this thing.
He just wants to let it, because he's so hell-bent on the whole, like, they actually think he's a god. I'll show you who's a god. I have control of him,
Right. And at this point, he's also pissed because it bit off his fingers.
It bit off 2 of his fingers.
Yeah.
And they're not sticking.
No. So then we have Eliza overhearing all of this and realizes that it's critical now that she has to get the creature out because he doesn't have a lot of time.
It's time to make a plan.
Right. And she discovers, so the men leave and they go into like another room, like up above, and she can tell from Dr. Hofstetler's expression that the decision has been made to vivisect the creature. So again, we're seeing her gain information looking at a screen, like because it's the glass pane, so
totally.
And the expression of Hofstetler's face gives her all the information she needs, which is that they're going to kill him. So she's like, oh God, we have to hurry up. So she then has this like beautiful conversation with Giles where she's trying to convince him that he has to help her save the creature and he's not having it. And she says to him, she's like, repeat. And he's like, okay. So basically everything she's saying, he has to say it out loud. So it's like this exercise, this mirror exercise that makes the scene so much more poignant because he is not just that he has to understand what she's saying.
She wants him to hear it out loud.
Yeah.
Say it out loud.
He has to say it. And so I thought that was beautiful. And then, of course, that heartbreaking, she says, when he looks at me, how he looks at me, he doesn't see what I lack, how I am incomplete. And you're just like, oh my God.
Oh, yeah.
That's the definition of love. Like, when you're in love with someone, you feel like
you fill in the blanks.
Yeah, that they're seeing you for like the person you want to be, And so that was so beautiful. And of course, Giles having to say it, you can tell that he's understanding, but he's still not going to help her.
Yeah. He's got something else on his mind.
Yeah. So he goes off and of course he gets shot down for the work thing. He ends up at the diner where you have that other incredible scene, the cruel scene where, or sequence where he's with the
pie guy,
and they're like kind of flirting, or at least he thinks they're flirting, and he puts his hand on the man's thigh or knee.
That touches his hand.
Oh, he touches his hand?
Yeah.
Okay. He touches his hand and the guy's like, whoa, what are you doing? And then all of a sudden he's like, oh, no, I'm so sorry. Like I whatever. And he doesn't even get a chance to really explain because then this black couple walks in and they're about to sit down at the counter, which is empty. And the guy goes to like douchebag mode.
Instant KKK.
Oh my God. He's like, not there. You can't sit there. And I don't know what he says to them.
And they're like, well, no one's sitting here. He's like, no, not for you.
Yeah. And he's like, there's some spots in the back if you want to sit down or take out only or
Yeah,
something. I don't know
something like
what he
that.
says. Something horrible.
But his total face turned into like like two-faced.
Yeah, for real. And then they're like, oh, so they leave and he gives them that like twangy, like, you all come back now, you hear? Like his line.
Right.
And then Giles, I forget what Giles says to him, but he's like, I think I'm going to go. And he's like, yeah, and don't come back. This is a family restaurant.
Right.
And you're like, oh my God, you just feel so like.
And then he like wipes his tongue of the shitty key lime
the
pie.
key lime pie. But when he says this is a family restaurant, it feels like.
But this is something, and you too, old man.
Yeah. Don't come back.
Don't come back. This is a family restaurant.
But just him saying that it's a family restaurant makes me feel like it clarifies even further how Giles and Eliza feel, because they don't have a family.
Right.
They don't have anywhere where they belong, really. So that was like a crystal clear definition of who they are and how they feel, right? They're disenfranchised.
Now I'm all like, you better go help Eliza now.
So of course, this motivates him
Right.
to go see her. And he says to her, I have no one. I have no one. I have to help you. Like he decides to help her because he doesn't have anyone. And he says that, whatever this creature is, you need it. So I'm going to help you. And so you feel like, okay, they're a family, they're a unit, they're together, they're going to make this happen, right? So there's that. And then
it's about to go down.
It's about to go down. Then the Russians at this point have already decided they're going to kill the creature as well.
Yeah, folks, the Russians.
To keep it out of the American hands. And so I've written down that, that there's different theme, like the theme of what everybody wants for the creature, right? So you have science through Dr. Hofstetler that wants to help the creature, study the creature, learn from the creature.
Right.
Then you have like the emotional Eliza, and
he's got a creature crush.
Yeah, well, I don't think he has a crush on. I mean, he does. He admires it.
Well, of course, it's fascinating.
But I think he's clinical.
Yeah.
I think he doesn't want to hurt him, but only because he can learn from him.
Right.
Whereas,
right. He wants to keep him captive.
Right. Yeah. He doesn't want to let him go.
Right.
But he wants to learn from him. And then you have the romantic, emotional side, which is Eliza and Zelda and Giles, that are like, they want to save him because they want him to be a part of their lives, right? Like they want that connection.
Right.
They felt the connection and want that connection with him. And then you have like the authority, which is like Strickland and the military and whatever, and they couldn't care less and they want to kill it.
Of course.
So
get rid of the asset.
Yeah. So it's just interesting, if you think of the sea creature as like the future, it's interesting how these different aspects correlate. So science, you think of the future, they embrace the future because they want to.
Right. And this is all to get technology to be able to go to space.
Right. Exactly. But authority wants to stomp it out.
Right.
Because authority is all about keeping the status quo.
Right. They're like,
not moving forward.
Kill it, rip it apart, figure out its technology so we can use it for our benefits to beat the Russians.
Right.
The Russians are like, kill it. That way no one knows anything.
Right. So then we go into this scene with Strickland buying that car, which I thought, I like the scene. I do. But I didn't understand. Was it necessary?
Doesn't someone at some point say you need a new car or?
The salesman says this is a car of the future.
No, but how does he end up there?
That's the thing. He just kind of walks in.
Doesn't he announce it at some point? Like, I'm going to get me a new car? No?
I don't know. Because when he walks into
Does he see an ad on TV?
Maybe. But he walks into that dealership. It doesn't even look like he wants to buy a car. the guy sells him the car because he's all like, this is the car of the future. You
Yeah,
look like
yeah,
you're the
yeah.
man of the future.
Right.
You need this car. Like that kind of thing.
Right.
And then he walks out with the car. And you're like, but
Well, he was feeling pretty high, right? Because like the general
I guess
was just like, when you get this done,
Right.
this is you're gonna be set for life, kind of thing. So that's what
I
what I'm
mean-
saying. I feel like it was like celebratory for himself.
oh, okay.
Like
Yeah,
I'm the man. I got this.
I can see that.
I got a fancy new car because I am the man of the future.
Right. Yeah, I can see that. Then he's driving and like there's a car full of young people and they
Great
like
salesman, by the way.
yeah.
Right.
They honk at him
Right.
and they like it.
Exactly.
They like his vibe. So he's feeling
So they're
good.
pumping him up. He's pumped.
Right? And then there was I felt like there was some Brazilian music playing. There was also a lot of I didn't really talk about it, but there was a lot of different music in the movie.
Yeah.
Sometimes it sounds Brazilian, sometimes it sounds French, sometimes it sounds Italian. Like it's just a lot of different
Worldly, very worldly.
worldly, yeah, like all kind. But in this particular sequence, it was like Brazilian, happy, upbeat type
Right.
music. And then we're back to Giles and Eliza, and Giles says to her, "I'm so proud of you. You're not afraid," because they're getting ready for the heist, basically.
Right.
And she's like, "I am afraid."
Right.
And he's like, "Don't tell me that,"
Right.
because he like made himself a fake ID.
Yeah.
And like all
He's
this
got to
stuff.
decorate. He's got to paint the van.
Yeah, he's got to use all his skills to make this work. And then we're back to Strickland, and you can see that his fingers are decaying. It's disgusting. They're going to keep deteriorating throughout the
Yes.
film, which is interesting because if he's the monster of the film, this is like his molting or his like what?
Falling apart.
Yeah, but like
Everything's because literally everything starts falling apart around him.
I feel like the fingers are like his humanity, like that have been severed.
Yeah.
And it's like he's trying to put them back, but it's
Or
like he's
just
not
his plan,
human anymore.
his life plan. With those two, he brought it upon himself.
I know. So these things are just they're black. It's disgusting.
Right. The monster bit the fingers off. Mm-hmm. Then they were put into a bag with some cheese in there by the people who ended up helping the monster escape
Yeah.
from the man whose fingers they were.
Right. So he's like sort of cradling his fingers and watching Eliza work from his office, which is
Right.
another fishbowl situation.
Yes.
So he can see her, and then he like spills the water on purpose, very deliberately, to call her in so she can clean it up. And then he proceeds to sexually harass her. He's disgusting. He says, I don't know how many disgusting things.
Right. Well, he talks about the whole like, I like that you can't talk.
Yes, remember? Because he likes silence. He's like,
Yeah.
"Ugh, skeevy. And then he says to her, don't you even squawk? Like, ew. And then at the
Yeah.
end, when she's leaving, he's like, I bet I can get a squawk out of you. Ugh. You just, oh.
He's on
so
top of the world
gross.
right now,
He's
man.
so gross. He's so gross.
He's got a huge boner right now.
Ugh. So that was disgusting. But she already has her plan.
Yeah.
So she leaves. And there's another, after she leaves, he has a scene with Dr. Hofstetler where the doctor like walks into his office to ask for more time. And he's like, you have to knock.
Oh my God, such a power play.
Yes. And he's reading some ridiculous book. It was like how to keep your mind clear or for success or
power
something.
of positivity.
So he makes him do this
That
whole,
stuff's brilliant.
Yeah. He makes him do this like stupid thing with the knocking and like he's just asserting.
Go out and knock. Protocol.
Yeah. Yeah. So he has to go out and knock, and then he comes in and he asks for more time and he says no. And then while the doctor is talking to Strickland, he looks up, and through the screen,
Yep.
there are various
The
screens,
security
camera
screens.
the security cameras. He can see
Monitors.
that one of the cameras is being tampered with. So I think he puts it together that somebody is about to do something. And remember, he'd been given an explosive by the Soviets to break out the creature so they could kill it. So he had an explosive that he decides to plant.
He had the serum that he's supposed to inject in the creature and kill
that's
it.
right. That's right.
What he had was a device that like cuts the power for 5 minutes. It explodes and it shuts the whole power down for the whole grid for like 5 minutes or something like that.
Right. So he uses it
Yes.
because he realizes that Eliza is going to help.
He's going to help them.
Yeah, he's going to get the creature out. That's what he wants. So then we have the escape, and it's like a whole bunch of stuff that happens, and Eliza has a standoff with Zelda, but Zelda finally gives in, and then they get the creature out. But of course, not before Giles is held up, and Strickland realizes something's going down, so he like hurries down there, but they make it through because of Hofstetler's little explosive thing and the syringe that he uses on the guard, and then they hit Strickland's brand new car.
Oh my God, with the van. This turns into like a almost comedic relief Ocean's 11 type heist.
Yeah.
He's all nervous. He's like, I did great, right? And then slams into Strickland's car.
Right. And then my favorite part is when, Strickland is like, all right, I have 24 hours before I have to like let anybody know. And then the other guy is like, oh, I already called them.
Right. Like the Bobo security.
So again, this
head of security of the building.
Yeah. So the time issue comes into play again because he thinks he has time, and the other guy already cut him.
Right. So he has
cut his balls off. Basically,
no time.
He has no time. So so we see him in his office through the fishbowl, Strickland, and he's looking at Eliza through the glass and beginning to formulate suspicion. So we cut to Giles with the sea creature now, because now they've brought the sea creature home.
He's
and
in the bathtub.
Put him in the bathtub and whatever. And I noticed
the Russian guy gave him the stuff that he has to put into the water.
Yes, the flakes.
Yeah.
And he said they have to put like salt in the water, which they did. And so they were just keeping him in the bathtub for now. But Giles is so funny because I wrote that he like turns everything to himself.
Right.
Here he has this majestic, otherworldly, godlike creature, and he's talking about himself.
Yeah.
Like he's just like, I don't even know what he says about himself. His hair, I don't know what he says. But I'm like, oh my God, Giles, really? Like this is like this incredible creature, and you're just like, oh, and woe is me. And then you
he's in his own fishbowl.
Yes, exactly. Then you cut back to Giles interrogating Eliza and Zelda, and he gets very frustrated, and he's like, what the fuck am I doing interviewing the help? Like, he's just, again, with that classist, And then he's like,
he's like, why am I paranoid over the fucking cleaners?
Yeah, and he's like, the shit cleaners,
Right.
And then, of course, Eliza says, like, she signs, fuck you.
Yeah.
Right? And he's like, what'd she say? And Zelda's, like, stalling because she doesn't know what to say. And he gets so angry. And it's so great because you're like, finally, like, they're getting the best of him. They're getting the best of him.
Yep. And she's like, he said, thank you.
Yeah, she said, thank you. So at that point, I think she did say thank you just to like get out of there.
Right.
And then we have the creature and Giles again, and the creature kills the cat.
Right. Giles falls asleep.
Yes.
The creature gets out of the bathtub, walks into the living room, grabs a cat, and bites its head off.
And then when Giles wakes up, he goes over and he's like, no. And the creature gets scared and slices Giles's forearm.
Yep.
And then he like faints or whatever. And then the creature
runs out the door.
And then when Eliza gets home, it's like the shit hit the fan, and she's got to go out and look for the creature, and she finds him in the theater.
Right, beneath the apartments.
And it's this beautiful shot of them in like this empty theater looking at
He was just standing there watching at the screen. Yeah,
looking at the screen.
The beauty.
And it's so beautiful.
Magic of film.
Yeah, and it's so romantic and beautiful, and he's like the male lead, in this movie. I don't know what that is. And then we go back to Strickland, and his fingers keep rotting, and he's interrogating Hofstetler, and after
she brings him back upstairs, right? After the movie theater?
Yeah, but I think they cut to this scene first.
Sorry. Okay.
Yeah,
no, you're right.
And then, but I like that Dr. Hofstetler gives him back his protocol crap.
Yes.
Because he calls him by his name, and he's like, Doctor. He's like, protocol. And so you just see like everyone's giving it to him a little bit, right. Strickland, because
they're starting to see the
sliding.
Cracks.
Yeah, he's sliding. Like he didn't get the job done.
Mm-hmm.
And then we go back to Eliza and the creature, and he's in the bath, and she's basically saying goodnight. I mean, he kind of was like, maybe like, I don't know, he did something with her blouse or something, and she got a little scared, like,
right.
She like kind of went away from him because she
doesn't he have to, like, the sea creature apologize to Giles?
Yeah, I think he did.
Giles.
Yeah, he did.
He like touches him when he glows.
Yeah,
on his head and on his arm.
Yeah, he did do that. And then he's in the bathtub, and they're basically saying goodnight, and he just like kind of moves her blouse or something. I don't know, like
something. But there's a spark.
She freaks though. Yeah, she like runs away.
Yeah.
But then she thinks about it, and she comes back, and then you're like, oh, they spend the night together. And then she starts wearing red.
Right.
And she's on the bus, like with the twirling, dancing raindrops.
Daydreamy.
Yes. And then there's a scene between Hofstetler and the Soviets where they're interrogating him about what happened to the creature. And he's serving them like this sponge cake or buttercream cake.
Yeah.
Or whatever. So again, we have the food. And what is he doing with the food? I thought he poisoned it.
I thought so too.
There was like this tension. And I thought that it was the poison in the cake, but it wasn't. He was just holding a knife. Right.
And they always have like the henchmen.
Who's like, do you have some milk?
Yeah. And his boss is like, come on.
Just get out. And then Strickland's in his car, and I think because he's like I think he's doing surveillance on, or maybe he's just lamenting the fact that he is messing up, but his fingers stink.
Yeah.
And he's like...
He is out snooping around.
Yeah, right? I think he's watching Hofstetler.
Right.
Yeah. And then we cut back to Eliza, and...
he like squeezes the pus out of his fingers and stuff.
Gross.
Yeah,
it's so gross. Then we're back to Eliza and the creature, and that's when they have that scene with the water where they like fit like
she fills up the whole bathroom with water, and it's a whole underwater scene like in the beginning of the movie.
Yeah, but it's just like physically impossible.
Yeah.
But it still doesn't
total
matter.
fantasy.
It's fantasy, and it's beautiful, and the water is just spilling and dripping into the movie theater and onto the hall, and
right.
Like it doesn't matter.
As far as she was concerned, the whole room was filled with water.
Yeah. And it just didn't matter, and I loved it because it was so like Guillermo del Toro,
Yeah.
He's just like, what?
Yeah. And then the whole room fills up with water.
And
what?
We're talking about love.
Yeah. You got some good towels. I mean, you'll be fine.
So that fantastic fantasy element was beautiful. So they have that, and it's raining in the theater.
Right, and the point was that you could see through her floors into the movie theater.
Right. So when we had that scene in the beginning,
pouring water.
Yeah. So then it's clear that the doctor's being watched by Strickland and the head of security, and at the same time, the canal is rising, the water with the rain.
Right, because she had put on her calendar
that she was going to let him go.
A certain date when the storm comes, and they showed that the high tide happens during those months.
Right. And meanwhile, the creature is getting sick.
Yes.
And we have an interrogation, or the general visits Strickland, and he gives him a hard time. He's just like, get the job done, you know? And so Strickland feels real pressure now
Right.
to finish this up. And then we have Eliza and the creature, because the time is coming where she's going to have to bring him to the canal. And they're just like having dinner, basically. And the scene morphs into like a musical.
The big dance scene.
Where she's singing to him.
The old-timey musical number, singing about her love for him.
For him. And then they're like dancing together as though they were in a musical. And it's so pretty. And like she's able to communicate with him like using words and song. And,
right.
And it's gorgeous. And then after that, it's like sort of coming to the end. You know, the timing is off because they're trying to call the doctor for help because he's getting so sick.
Right, it's getting worse and worse
and
worse.
Yeah, Zelda's like, we should call the doctor. But as they're calling him, he just left his apartment. So the timing is off. It's so critical, and it's off. And then as the doctor is leaving, the Soviets, well, he arrives where he was supposed to meet with the Soviets, and they shoot him. And then Strickland has followed him, so he shoots them.
Right.
And then he tortures the doctor for information about how the creature got out.
And he's like, you're Russian.
Yeah. He like picked him up by the bullet hole in his face. Oh my God,
that was so gross.
Like the hook on a fish's face.
Yeah. Hook. Yeah, exactly. A fish on the hook.
You know? So it was just so brutal. And he's like torturing him with the cattle prod. Like, it's just awful.
Right.
So finally the doctor gives it up. And he's
but that's the thing, is that Strickland was just like, you know, what organization did this? Like, he's like, what military, you know, consortium or whatever. Like, he's just like, what special ops? No. He's like, obviously a special ops team did this. And he was like, no
plan.
They
just clean.
They just clean.
And it's almost like he's laughing.
Yeah.
So then Strickland puts it together, and he heads over to Zelda's to get information from her. And he's basically like threatening her.
Right.
Because he tells her the Delilah story and like...
Passive threatening.
Yeah, but then he rips his fingers off in her face. And you're like, oh my God, he's insane. And then Brewster...
Dude, Brewster's like...
He's like...
I'll tell you everything.
Yo,
just get the hell out of my house.
The other girl took him. So he leaves. And Zelda tries to warn Eliza.
What did you do, Brewster?
I know.
What did you do?
So Zelda warns Eliza, and Eliza pieces out, and Strickland arrives completely unhinged. He's like not even human anymore. He's a hot mess, and he's like searching for clues. And of course, he finds the calendar that says they're going to the canal. So he goes there. And just as Eliza and Giles bring the creature to the canal, before that, Giles had noticed that because the creature touched his head, he got
Yes,
hair.
I was waiting for that. Yes. His hair grew back earlier. And his scars, there was no scars. He was healed, yeah.
So he obviously has like healing powers.
Like, we need to keep him around.
Yeah. Again, it was like for himself.
Right.
He's so selfish. But you know, Giles is saying goodbye to the creature, and he puts his hand on his head, you know, like to say goodbye because they've learned to communicate that way. And then the creature thinks that he and Eliza are going to go in the water together, but she has to tell him no, and it's so heartbreaking because it's so hard for her to say and for him to understand.
Yeah.
And then amidst all this, of course, Strickland shows up and shoots them both. And then Giles knocks him out with like a 2x4.
That was awesome.
Yeah. So the creature heals him. By the way, all of this is happening in like this torrential downpour of water. Right. So water is all around us. And then you have the creature heals himself and goes to Strickland and basically cuts his vocal cord. Like he just slices his whole throat.
Yes.
And so he's like, again, like a garroted fish, you know,
Right.
like he's just on the ground bleeding out in this rain. Very well deserved.
Right.
And then the creature takes Eliza with him into the canal. And you realize as they're sinking further and further into the water, she comes alive. And then you realize that the scars on her neck, which had been introduced earlier in the film, and even Strickland had mentioned them in one of the interrogations, you realize that they're not scars, they're like gills.
Right.
So they like open up, and you realize that she belonged there all along, and she's with him like forever now. They're like gonna live happily ever after. And then you have Giles's voiceover, which basically says that. You know, at the end,
right.
He says that, and then he ends with like that beautiful poem about not being able to see you. You're in everything. Like it was like a lover talking to another.
Very
like,
beautiful, yeah.
Where they say, in not being able to define you, you're everywhere.
Right.
You know, your love is everywhere, like the shape of water. So that's the end of the movie, and you have. So we started with being underwater and we end being underwater.
Right. And also what I love about when the asset, the fish man, revives itself after he got shot, Strickland sees him heal himself. And that's when he acknowledges him as a god.
Oh, yeah. I hadn't even
which was pretty awesome.
registered that.
And then that's when the acid just went and slashed his throat. Like, yeah, mofo, I am a god. And you dead.
And you're dead. He needed to die.
This is the way it works, Strickland. I kill you.
So yeah, so then that's it. They live happily ever after, you figure. And the fairy tale is over.
And the fairy tale is over.
And it's beautiful.
No, it's a really beautiful film.
You know, a lot happens.
Yeah, and if you have a chance to, like, if you buy the film and you get the extras, like we have the iTunes extras, I mean, like, you have hours worth of amazing stuff to watch. It's not just like deleted scenes. It's like the making of it, character building, the way they designed it.
The guy's suit.
The suit.
The creature.
Yeah, the asset.
It took like years.
Yeah, Del Toro did his whole like privately financed getting the suit together before even the movie went into production just to be ready.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like they say he uses big budgets and all that, but I think he uses it wisely because it's practical. It's not like, some extravagant, stupid stuff.
Yeah. And he apparently wrote the story with Sally Hawkins in mind for Eliza and Michael Shannon for Strickland.
Yeah. That's amazing.
Yeah.
Hats off to him. Congratulations on those awards.
Yeah. Well deserved.
I mean, totally well deserved. So the time has come to bring this 8th episode of After Dark to a close. It was lovely discussing shit. Disgusting. It was lovely discussing.
It sounded like you said it was lovely disgusting shit.
Right?
Wait,
it was
what?
lovely disgusting shit we had here, right? No, it was totally lovely disgusting shape of water, especially hate-free.
Yes.
Like we like to do here on the 0DB podcast family. As always, thank you for being the other half of the we on this After Dark show here on the 0DB podcast feed.
Thank you.
I had a great time. This was a good talk. I love these reviews.
Thank you for letting me come on.
No problem. I am your host, Gabe Yell. Be sure to check us out at 0dbpodcast.com. And thank you for listening. See you next time.
Thank you. Bye-bye.